She fined me $4,200 for a firearms violation on property zoned agricultural, then showed up waving the same revolver she claimed I owned. It was the 12th citation in 19 days. I still remember the smell of paper toner and panic when I read Final Notice, Lien Pending. Welcome to HOA Society. My name's Cole Mercer, civil engineer, 42, father of one, resident of Denton County, Texas. I rebuild bridges by day and apparently neighborhoods by night. If you care about fairness where you live, I'd be honored if you'd subscribe. Tell me where you're watching from. I'm always curious how other communities handle power gone sideways. I bought this ranch 5 years ago, 20 acres of scrub oak, 1 red barn, and a promise to my late father that I'd keep a place for our horses to roam. He died in 18, just after finishing the fence line with me. I can still hear him say, "Keep the land honest, son." That was before the Blue Ridge HOA annexed our road and told us we'd now be subject to aesthetic governance. At first, it sounded harmless, 100 tons a month for beautification. Then came the letters. Wrong mailbox color, $75. Tractor visible from the road, $250. Barn paint, non-compliant beige, $500. I paid none of them, kept everything documented in a blue binder labeled Evidence, Phase 1. My neighbor Edna, 82 and sharp as frost, said, "They're testing you. Don't blink." The president, Sandra Lowell, smiled like a realtor when she first visited. She gestured to my pasture and said, "Your property lowers values unless you conform." I asked, "To what?" She said, "Our standard." That's when I noticed the HOA logo engraved on her brooch, a little bronze house with a fence around it. Symbolic, I guess. When the firearms violation notice arrived, it accused me of displaying a weapon during a board walkthrough. I wasn't home that day. My security footage, lawful. I recorded under Texas one-party consent, showed Sandra lifting a tarp and photographing my father's antique rifle rack inside the barn. That's when I knew this wasn't about grass height, it was about control. I started pulling public plats, tax IDs, parcel maps. The HOA's common property overlay included my access easement, an old 30-foot strip recorded in 1972. They never updated the meets and bounds when the developer sold Phase 2. I highlighted the overlap in yellow, taped it to my kitchen window. My friend Dana, a land use attorney with ink-stained cuffs and a permanent coffee thermos, looked it over. "If that easement's still public right-of-way," she said, "they can't enforce squat on it." I asked how to confirm. She handed me a form. County Recorder's Office, chain of title request, $1,200 fee. So, on March 14th, I drove to the courthouse, boots clicking on terrazzo floors, and requested Book 1889, page 237. The clerk rolled her eyes. Few people still do it on paper. But she fetched the reel. There it was, the original easement dedication, signed and sealed. No abandonment filing, meaning public right-of-way still intact. Knowledge. Nugget number 1. In Texas, a recorded easement remains valid until a formal release or vacation is filed, no matter how many HOAs spring up around it. I didn't tell Sandra. Not yet. I wanted to see how far she'd go. The next day, a board compliance officer parked outside my gate for 2 hours. He took photos every 10 minutes, even measured my mailbox post. I noted timestamps: 9:04 a.m., 9:16, 9:25, 9:38. Pattern established. That night my daughter Lily asked why men in SUVs kept stopping by. She's 9. I said, "They're checking fences, honey." She said, "You should check theirs." She was right. I stayed up until 2 a.m. scanning their bylaws, public record thanks to a lazy upload. Section 8.04. Board members shall lose any financial interest in vendors or real estate contiguous to association property. Sandra's husband owned the contractor repaving the HOA's private loop road. Classic conflict. I printed it, circled it in red. Edna brought pecan pie the next morning and squinted at the paper. "You gonna spook the horses or the lawyers first?" she asked. "Neither," I said. "I'm going to buy time." On April 2nd, they scheduled a special hearing about my supposed violations. 13 counts, $4,200 total, plus threat of lien. I RSVP'd attending. I also filed a temporary signage permit with the county to place a right-of-way maintained by county, no private jurisdiction sign at my gate. Legal, reflective, bold black letters. The meeting was held in their beige clubhouse under buzzing fluorescents. Sandra presided behind a folding table like it was Congress. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "your non-compliance endangers our community values." I said, "Your jurisdiction ends 30 feet before my fence." Then I slid the plat across the table. She glanced at it, smirked, and said, "You misunderstand how governance works." I didn't argue. I just said, "We'll see who governs the ground under our feet." The room went quiet except for the hum of the soda fridge. I could feel the gravel from my driveway still on my boots, the last honest dirt in that carpeted room. That night, I locked my gates. 2 days later, I found a new citation taped to my mailbox. Obstruction of easement access. The irony almost made me laugh. But I wasn't laughing when a sheriff's deputy knocked 3 mornings later saying the HOA had requested a wellness check. Lily was brushing her teeth when the flashlight swept past our window. That was the moment fear turned into something else, resolve. I called Dana. "They want a war," I said. She replied, "Then document every bullet of bureaucracy they fire. Paper beats panic." So I did. Every notice, every visit, every whisper in the neighborhood app, they all went into Binder 2, Phase 2, retaliation. And still, I kept quiet about the easement, because leverage isn't noise, it's silence with proof. By May, they'd stacked 17 citations, totaling $8,975. Edna's mailbox got one too, for overgrown ivy. She laughed, mailed a check for $1 with Ivy Fund in the memo. They returned it marked insufficient. She framed it. That's when I decided to escalate, but carefully. A single move out of turn, and they'd own the narrative. So I opened a new LLC, Blue Ridge Access Holdings. Anonymous filing through a registered agent in Austin cost me $310. Purpose: acquisition and maintenance of easement properties. No one tied it to me. Then I waited. Because patience, not power, wins hearings. When the next HOA newsletter bragged about planned enhancement of community entry landscaping, I smiled. That project line item, $27,000, sat directly over the easement parcel. They were about to spend HOA funds improving land they didn't own. And that's where the story truly begins. I didn't sleep much that night. Every rustle outside sounded like a camera shutter. Every headlight down the road looked like another inspection. By morning, I had a plan so quiet it barely breathed. I drove to the county tax assessor's office, slid a manila envelope across the counter, and bought the easement strip for $2,200 in back taxes plus a $45 recording fee. The clerk stamped it. Filed, May 22nd, 10:43 a.m. That was the moment I became both the target and the owner of their battlefield. 2 days later, Sandra called. "We noticed fresh survey stakes on the north boundary," she said, voice dripping sugar. "Are you planning unauthorized construction?" I said, "Just clarifying property lines." She said, "You're testing patience, Mr. Mercer. The board has options. So do I." When I hung up, Dana texted, "Good, don't tip leverage too early. Let them record one more overreach. It'll compound damages later." It did. They issued violation notice number 18 for unauthorized signage and obstruction of common entry. My sign, my land. I smiled and took a time-stamped photo of the notice curling under its own tape in the afternoon heat. By now, even the horses sensed the tension. They huddled near the fence, ears flicking at every car door slam. 3 days later, I was served with a certified letter, intent to lien, case number 2025-113. That night I drove to Dana's office, a low brick suite that smelled like copier ink and burnt coffee. She scanned the paperwork and snorted. "They cited a parcel you now own. This is a self-inflicted wound." We built a timeline, every notice, date, dollar, and quote, down to the minute. It filled 14 pages. At the bottom, Dana wrote in blue pen, "Causation chain established. Proceed per discretion." The next morning, I met Edna on her porch. She poured coffee into chipped mugs. "You look like a man holding a lit match near gasoline," she said. "I'm just waiting for them to strike first," I said. "Then have your bucket ready," she said, tapping her mug. The bucket came in the form of a quiet ally, Tommy, a retired code enforcement officer who'd tangled with the HOA years earlier. He knew every statute they pretended to enforce. "They overreach on zoning all the time," he said. "You get them once on jurisdiction and the county'll wash its hands of them." He pointed to my sign. "That's your firewall. Keep the documentation neat, keep your voice calm, and when they crack, we'll be ready." That week, HOA chatter lit up the community forum. Mercer defying board order, unsafe conditions, non-compliance escalation. Sandra herself posted, "Some owners think they're above the rules. Let's remind them who maintains standards. If you've ever dealt with an HOA, tell me, have they ever used standards as a sword instead of a guide? Drop your story or addy. Vice below, so the next person fighting this nonsense has a map to start from. And if you're on an HOA board watching, leave your defense here. Let's see if fairness still means something." The real escalation hit June 3rd, 9:12 a.m. A contractor arrived unannounced with a backhoe and started trenching for decorative lighting along the road. My road. I stepped out, camera rolling. "Who authorized this?" I asked. "Board order," he said. "Phase 1 beautification." I pointed to the stake with my LLC's tag. "You're digging on private property. Stop now." He hesitated. I showed him the recorded deed on my phone. He shut the engine down. Sandra arrived within minutes, red-faced, HOA binder clutched like a weapon. "You can't halt community projects," she barked. I said, "Technically I can." And I just did. She waved papers in the air. "This is common area maintenance." "Filed May 22nd, I said, holding up my stamped deed. "Parcel now privately held by Blue Ridge Access Holdings." She blinked, confused, then furious. "You think this trick will last? We'll challenge it." "Please do," I said. "Discovery will be educational." Dana called that evening, half amused, half cautious. "Congratulations, Cole. That's leverage, but keep it buried for now. Let them keep building their own wall of violations." Over the next 3 weeks, the harassment turned clinical. Citations for dust accumulation on mailbox flag, inconsistent gravel hue, even improperly coiled hose. I logged each one. The HOA's email server accidentally CC'd me on an internal chain where Sandra wrote, "Make it unbearable. He'll sell or settle." That line became Exhibit 37. Knowledge nugget number 2. Under U.S. housing law, selective enforcement and retaliatory fines constitute a breach of fiduciary duty. It voids board immunity when proven systematic. I taped that nugget on the inside cover of Binder 3, VHS, as 3 exposure. By mid-July, the pressure was visible. Sandra's minivan started idling outside my gate nightly. Neighbors whispered that board funds were tight. Edna's Ivy citation escalated to a lien threat, which she ignored with a laugh. Then came the spark. On July 28th, a community safety bulletin landed in every mailbox, claiming an armed homeowner threatened a board officer. It featured a blurry photo of me, taken from months earlier when I was cleaning my father's rifle for display. That night, 2 sheriff's cruisers rolled up again, lights flashing across my barn. Lily hid behind the couch, trembling. I stepped outside, hands raised, paperwork ready. Deputies checked, confirmed I had no firearm on me, no charges filed. But the damage was done. I realized then this wasn't about property lines anymore. It was about power and narrative. Dana texted, "It's time. Quietly prep the public meeting leverage. Don't reveal till verified authority present." So I drafted a single-page statement, notarized it, and slid copies into sealed envelopes marked for county review, Access Holdings claim. I spent the next week rebuilding my composure, even mowing the grass to perfect regulation height. Let them think compliance meant surrender. When the next HOA board meeting notice appeared, August 10th, 6:00 p.m., I RSVP'd again. And this time, I brought witnesses. The parking lot outside the clubhouse smelled like wet asphalt and citronella. A thunderstorm had just passed, leaving the air thick and humming. Edna rode shotgun in my truck, binder balanced on her lap, lipstick sharp as ever. "You sure you want me in there?" she asked. "I need someone who remembers what integrity looks like," I said. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed as people filled folding chairs. Sandra stood at the front in her pink blazer, same one from the violation photos, stacking manila folders like ammunities. "Onaz, we'll begin with case number 21, she announced. Mr. Mercer's ongoing non-compliance with community safety standards. I sat in the third row, binder open, pen poised. Dana joined us remotely on speakerphone, her voice cutting through the static. For the record, Mr. Mercer is represented. Sandra's smile cracked. Representation is unnecessary for internal governance. Dana replied, then consider me a friend attending a public meeting, which you announced via open notice. You could almost hear the gavel hesitate. They played a slideshow, photos of my gate, the reflective sign, the survey stakes. Sandra narrated like a prosecutor. This resident has obstructed community beautification and endangered volunteers. I stood. The volunteers trespassed on privately owned land. Here's the deed, recorded May 22nd. Please read the seal. She blinked. The room murmured. I could see the vice president, a wiry man named Ken, lean over and whisper, "That can't be real." "It's real," I said, "and every dollar of landscaping you spent there constitutes misuse of HOA funds." Dana's voice crackled. Per Texas Property Code Section 209.005, that's grounds for immediate board investigation. Sandra snapped, "You don't dictate our agenda?" I smiled. "No, the law does." If you're watching and you've ever stood up in one of these rooms, hands shaking, paperwork ready, tell me how it went. Did they listen or talk over you? Drop your story below. It helps others see what real courage looks like when the gavel starts shaking. The room descended into low arguments. A neighbor named Travis, who'd been silent for months, stood up and said, "If he owns that strip, why are we paying for lighting there?" His question hung in the air like a bell. Sandra slammed her folder shut. "Meeting adjourned." But I didn't move. "Actually, per your own bylaws, adjournment requis. Where's a motion and second?" No one spoke. I continued. "Since you've just invalidated your own process, I'm making an official motion to suspend further enforcement actions until the county reviews jurisdiction." Edna raised her hand. "I second." The silence that followed was heavy and strange. The board had cornered itself with its own rulebook. Afterward, Travis followed me outside. "You really bought that land?" he asked. "Yep. They ignored their own filings for decades." He grinned. "Sandra's gonna blow a fuse." She already did. 2 days later, HOA posts vanished from the neighborhood app. Comments disabled. Then came the community update email. Due to unforeseen complications, beautification phase 1 is paused pending legal clarification. Legal clarification. Their words, not mine. Knowledge nugget number 3. When an HOA admits legal clarification, it triggers disclosure obligations to members. Anything withheld becomes discoverable in a challenge. Emails, contracts, even texts. I forwarded the email to Dana. She replied, "Perfect. We've shifted from defense to audit." That weekend, I built a new fence line, not out of defiance but clarity. Each post exactly 8 feet apart, laser leveled. It wasn't about keeping anyone out. It was about defining truth in wood and wire. Still, the retaliation didn't stop. They tried soft harassment now. Anonymous tips to animal control. Horses neglected, disproven. A county assessor randomly scheduled a property revaluation. Even a fake review popped up online calling me unstable rancher with firearm issues. I cataloged everything. Timestamps, screenshots, officer badge numbers. It became almost ritual, proof before outrage. One humid evening, I caught Sandra parked by the fence, photographing the new posts. I walked up quietly. She flinched when she saw me. "Doing another inspection?" I asked. "I'm verifying setbacks," she said. "That's funny," I said. "Because the county inspector signed off yesterday. Want to see the form?" She didn't. She just muttered, "You think you're clever." "I think I'm tired." "Of rules?" she said. "No," I said, "of rulers." She left without another word. The next morning, an envelope appeared taped to my gate. Emergency board meeting. Subject, member conduct and sanctions. I smiled. Predictable. Dana called that night. "They'll try to strip your voting rights. Let them. It's the overreach we need." "Will it hurt?" I asked. only their credibility. We started preparing the set piece, documentation tabs labeled A through Z, audio files queued, Texas one-party consent, of course. The plan was simple. Let them run the meeting, commit the procedural violation, and then drop the jurisdiction hammer under official observation. We had one more ally to line up, a neutral authority. Dana said, "We'll need the county compliance officer there to validate the map. Quietly invite him as a guest observer." I did. Officer Ray Mullins, mid-50s, calm voice, carried a leather folio and smelled faintly of rain and graphite. "I don't take sides," he said when we met at the diner. "I'm not asking you to," I said, "just to confirm what's recorded." He nodded. "If it's filed, it's law." That line stuck with me all week. As August 17th approached, the air got thicker, slower. Even the horses seemed restless, kicking dust against the fence posts like they knew something was coming. At dusk on the 16th, I printed the last exhibit, HOA expense ledger, beautification fund, $27,000. Highlighted entry, lighting installation, parcel 21A, my parcel. I slid it into binder 4, phase 4, set piece. And that's when I realized they'd built their trap around a property line that no longer belonged to them. The storm was about to change direction. The night before the meeting, I barely slept. The crickets outside droned like static over a radio I couldn't turn off. At 3:11 a.m., I sat at the kitchen table with coffee gone cold, reading my father's old leather notebook. On the inside cover, in his block handwriting, it said, "Honesty outlasts authority." I rubbed the letters with my thumb until they blurred. By noon, I was calm. Too calm. I loaded the binders into the truck, 4 of them now, stacked like bricks, and drove to the clubhouse. The sky was hard blue, the kind that makes even asphalt glare. Inside, Sandra's voice was already echoing through the mic. "We will now address Agenda Item 4, sanctions against member Cole Mercer for repeated defiance and harassment." She loved that word, harassment. I sat in the front row this time, binder on my lap, recording light on my phone blinking red, openly, legally, compliant with Texas one-party consent. Officer Mullins stood at the back, arms crossed, notepad ready. Sandra began, "Mr. Mercer has interfered with board-approved projects and exhibited hostility toward volunteers. The board proposes suspension of his voting privileges and imposition of a $5,000 special fine." I stood slowly. "Before any motion, I request the board disclose all contracts and payment vouchers associated with Parcel 21A. She froze. "That's irrelevant." "It's very relevant," I said. "Because this invoice," I held up the highlighted ledger, "is for lighting installed on land owned by Blue Ridge Access Holdings, recorded May 22nd, same parcel. I have the deed, and the county compliance officer can verify." Mullins stepped forward. "That's correct," he said, voice level. "The parcel's title changed. The HOA has no jurisdiction there." The room buzzed like a hornet nest. Sandra slammed her hand on the table. "You planted that. You bogged it under false pretenses." I said, "I paid public taxes owed for 20 years. That's not false. That's responsible." Her face reddened. "You're trying to bankrupt this association." "No," I said. "I'm trying to make it accountable. If you're hearing this and you've ever watched a board twist truth into noise, tell me what you'd do. Walk away or stand your ground. Write it down below. Your story might be the reminder someone else needs tonight." Ken, the vice president, muttered, "He's right about jurisdiction." Sandra spun on him. "Whose side are you on?" He said quietly, "The side that keeps us out of court." Dana's voice came through the speaker, crisp and cutting. "Madam President, under the HOA's own bylaws, misuse of funds tied to non-association property requires immediate suspension pending audit. Shall we proceed with that motion instead?" You could hear the collective inhale. The treasurer, a nervous man with glasses that kept slipping, stammered, We might need counsel." Sandra tried to regain control. "This meeting is adjourned." I stepped forward. "No, it isn't." I slid the deed, the ledger, and the printed board minutes toward Mullins. "These are being filed with the county's ethics liaison within 24 hours, but before that, I'll offer one option." She glared. "What option?" "Transparency," I said. "Rescind the false citations, reimburse the misused funds, and schedule an open meeting for every homeowner, or I'll pursue this as fraud with the county and their insurer." For the first time, she looked uncertain. Her voice cracked. "You wouldn't?" I said, "Try me." Mullins cleared his throat. "The man's within his rights." That was the sound of authority shifting, just a small click, like a lock opening. After the meeting, the parking lot felt different. A few neighbors nodded to me instead of looking away. One whispered, "About time some," and stood up. Back home, Lily met me on the porch. "Did you win?" she asked. "Not yet," I said, but they stopped talking over me. She smiled. "Grandpa would be proud." I looked at the horizon, the fence posts lined up straight as promises. He'd tell me to finish what I started. The next morning, an HOA email went out. Effective immediately. Enforcement actions against Mr. Mercer are paused pending review. Paused wasn't enough. I wanted reform. Dana called that afternoon, voice charged. "They blinked, Cole. We need to press the audit angle now. Their insurance carrier will panic if they smell mismanagement." "How?" I asked. "Policy numbers in that ledger. File an inquiry citing potential unreported property expenditure. The carrier will demand disclosure." Knowledge nugget number 4. HOAs carry fidelity bonds and directors and officers insurance. Fraudulent or negligent spending voids coverage and triggers mandatory investigation. So I filed it. 3 days later, the insurer called me directly. "We've opened a case. Please forward your documentation." I did. 42 pages. The following week, rumor spread. The board's legal counsel withdrew representation. The treasurer resigned. Sandra scheduled an emergency executive session that never happened because quorum failed. Dominoes were beginning to fall. Edna stopped by with her thermos. "Feels like a storm broke," she said. "Not yet," I replied. "The clouds are just rearranging." She laughed. "Well, make sure the rain lands where it's needed." Her words stuck as the investigation deepened. HOA emails leaked showing they'd used reserve funds to cover the beautification shortfall. Members demanded explanations. Sandra sent a frantic group text. "Do not respond. Handle internally." Too late. Transparency had become contagious. By mid-September, the insurer's investigator confirmed unauthorized expenditures. They froze the HOA's account pending audit results. That's when Sandra called me personally, voice soft for the first time. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "what do you want?" I looked at my daughter feeding the horses under the orange evening light. "I want rules that protect people, not punish them," I said. She was silent. Then, "We can talk." That was the first crack in the wall she'd built. We met at the clubhouse 3 days later, just the two of us. The air conditioning clicked like an impatient metronome. Sandra looked smaller without her blazer, just a woman in a pale sweater holding too many papers. "I shouldn't have let it go that far," she said, voice barely above a whisper. I didn't gloat. "Then don't let it happen again." She rubbed her temples. "You exposed every crack in this board, the insurers threatening to suspend coverage." I nodded. "They will, unless you open your books and let the members vote on reforms." Her jaw tightened. "You'd burn the whole thing down for principle?" "I'd rebuild it right," I said. "That's what this was always about." Outside, thunder rolled low across the plains, rattling the glass. For a moment, she looked like she might cry, but instead she stood, pulled herself together, and said, "If you're serious, put it in writing." I already had. The document was titled Proposed Community Integrity Charter. It outlined everything: open records, annual independent audits, term limits, recall provisions, and an ethics committee elected by residents. I slid it across the table. "Adopt this, and we stop here. I'll withdraw the insurer complaint and release the audit results publicly to clear your name." She scanned it in silence. "You really drafted legislation for a neighborhood?" "No," I said. "For dignity." That night, I drove home through a curtain of rain. When I stepped onto the porch, Lily handed me a towel and said, "Did she say sorry?" "Not yet," I said. "But she might." Over the next week, rumors flew. Board resignations, emergency votes, whispers of dissolving the association, all together. Neighbors stopped by offering cookies, casseroles, quiet thanks. One man admitted he'd been fined $1,200 for a birdhouse his kids painted too bright. Another said his wife cried after being told her garden didn't conform. The stories poured out like floodwater. For the first time, people weren't afraid to talk. Still, the board retaliated one last time. On September 29th, I woke to find my mailbox post sawed in half, box tossed into the ditch. No witnesses, no proof. But everyone knew. That morning, I filed an incident report with the sheriff and sent the HOA a certified letter reminding them of the ongoing insurer audit. I didn't raise my voice. I just documented. If you've ever faced that kind of petty retaliation, tell me, what kept you from breaking? Was it principle or just stubbornness? Drop your answer. Someone else needs to know what strength looks like when they're this close to giving up. 2 days later, the HOA attorney, new one this time, emailed me directly. Our client requests to meet with your counsel to discuss potential resolution terms. Dana smirked when she read it. They're cornered. They'll trade reform for peace. The meeting took place October 4th in a neutral office downtown, all glass and steel, rain streaking the windows. Sandra sat at one end, Dana at the other, me in between. The new attorney, younger, polished, kept glancing at the file labeled Insurer Correspondence. Let's be clear, Dana began. Mr. Mercer has documented retaliation, selective enforcement, and misuse of funds, but he's offering a path forward. Sandra's eyes flicked to mine. What do you want, really? Transparency, I said again, and an apology to every homeowner you bullied. The lawyer interjected. We can issue a statement without admission of fault. Dana leaned back. Then there's no deal. For a long moment, the only sound was the rain ticking on the window. Then Sandra exhaled. Fine, you'll have your reforms. We drafted terms right there. Annual third-party audit with results published to all members. 3-year term limits for board officers. Mandatory public vote before any special assessment exceeding $2,000. Open records portal accessible online. Ethics oversight panel composed of 3 residents, 1 external advisor. When we finished, she signed with a trembling hand. Dana sealed the documents in a folder. Congratulations, she said. That's reversal number 2. I nodded slowly, the weight of months lifting but not gone. That night, I lit a small fire in the pit behind my barn. The first violation notice I ever got, the one about non-compliant beige, curled in the flames, edges turning orange, the ink bleeding into ash. The wind carried the smell of burnt toner and old injustice. Lily came out with a blanket. Is it over? She asked. Almost, I said. Tomorrow's the vote. The next day, the community gathered in the clubhouse. For the first time, Sandra stood not as president, but as a resident. She read the statement aloud. We acknowledge past errors and commit to transparency, fairness, and respect moving forward. The motion passed 42-1. Edna squeezed my arm and whispered, Told you to have your bucket ready. I laughed. Guess we put out the fire after all. But the story wasn't quite done. Outside, news cameras waited. Small local outlet, curious reporter named Hallie with wind-blown hair and a notepad. Mr. Mercer, she said, how did you manage to turn an HOA standoff into community reform? I smiled. By remembering it's not about beating them, it's about reminding them who they're supposed to serve. Hallie's story ran that night under the headline, Ranch Owner Forces HOA Reform After Months-Long Battle. It spread faster than I expected. First local, then regional. By morning, my phone was vibrating with interview requests and congratulations from strangers who'd lived the same nightmare. One email read, You gave the tool. Rest of us, a playbook. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt tired. Relief wasn't a roar. It was a long exhale that smelled faintly of wet hay and printer ink. That night, Lily helped me pack away the binders. Can we make a new one? She asked. For what? For the horses' birthdays, she said, grinning. I laughed. That's the best compliance policy I've heard yet. And as the porch light glowed over the calm ranch, I realized the fight that began with fear had ended in community. The land was still ours, the rules were fair, and for the first time, the silence meant peace, not waiting for footsteps. By November, frost dusted the pasture like powdered sugar. The air smelled of cedar and smoke from a dozen chimneys finally burning again. People weren't afraid to live openly on their own land anymore. The HOA sign at the neighborhood entrance had been repainted. No more gold cursive, just plain block letters. Blue Ridge Community Association. It looked honest for the first time. Donna called early one morning while I was stacking feed. "We got word from the state inspector's office," she said. "They've cited the old board for failure to maintain public disclosures and misuse of executive sessions. It's official now, probation, fines, and barred from office for 5 years." I leaned on the fence, watching sunlight creep through the mist. "That's more than I hoped for." She chuckled. "Justice tends to multiply when you plant it right." That afternoon, I received a letter from Sandra, handwritten, folded neat. "Thank you for forcing us to see what we'd become. I'll be volunteering at the local food co-op instead. No boards, no titles." I smiled, tucked it into the last binder, now retitled Aftermath. Later that week, a county meeting invited me to speak about citizen-led governance reform. I nearly declined, but Edna pushed me. "You're the man who made the suits listen," she said. "Go teach them how to use their ears." So I went. The hearing room smelled of dust, microphones, and old paper. Rows of homeowners from other Solcadage associations filled the seats. Some looked angry, others hopeful. When my turn came, I stepped up to the podium. 3 months ago, I began, I was the villain in my own neighborhood. I was fined, threatened, and almost broken by a system designed to protect itself. The difference between losing and winning wasn't anger. It was record-keeping, law, patience. The crowd leaned in. "If you're in the middle of your own fight, remember this. The board works for the people, not the other way around. Every bylaw, every notice, every dollar, they all have a paper trail. Find it, and truth will find you." A man in the second row raised his hand. "How far should an HOA go when it comes to control? Porch colors, gardens, fences, where's the line?" I nodded. Right where personal freedom meets shared safety. Beyond that, it's just vanity dressed as order. What do you all think? Where's the line for your neighborhood? The debate that followed was loud but alive. People talking, not shouting. Afterward, Hallie from the local station caught me in the hallway. "Your story's helping people," she said. "Think you'll run for something next?" I laughed. "No, I've had enough committees for a lifetime." Outside, the wind pushed brown leaves across the courthouse steps. Mullins was there too, leaning on his patrol car. "Looks like peace suits you," he said. "It's quieter," I replied. He tipped his hat. "Don't mistake quiet for the end of work." He was right. Reform isn't a finish line. It's a maintenance schedule. That night, I hosted a small gathering at the ranch. Neighbors brought chili, cornbread, even music. Kids played tag under string lights. Dogs chased shadows. And for the first time, everyone laughed without glancing at their yards like suspects. Around the fire, Travis asked, "So what now, Cole? You've rewritten the rules. What's next?" I poked at the embers. "Maybe much. Making sure nobody forgets why we did it. Maybe helping the next guy." Edna raised her mug. "To lawful mischief," she said. We all clinked cups. 2 days later, Officer Mullins stopped by. "Audit wrapped," he said, handing me a thin envelope. "Findings confirmed. Misuse of $27,000 HOA funds plus procedural violations. Counties recommending restitution and board turnover." "Any criminal referrals?" I asked. He nodded. "A few. They'll handle it quietly. Probation, fines, resignations. Justice, slow, but real." I thanked him. He smiled faintly. "Guess your father's land stays honest after all." That night, I walked the fence line under a fat harvest moon. The posts gleamed pale against the dark field, perfect and even. The horses whickered softly near the gate, and for the first time in months, I didn't look over my shoulder. Still, the ghost of those nights lingered. The flashlights through the window, the anonymous letters, the grinding fear of losing everything. Sometimes justice leaves fingerprints you can't wash off. If you've ever fought back against something bigger than you, an HOA, a city, a boss, what moment told you it was finally over? The first apology or the first quiet night? Let me know, or at least like the video so others see what calm after a storm really looks like. 2 weeks passed. The new board held its first open meeting. I went, sat in the back, said nothing. They reviewed landscaping bids in the light of day this time, with members asking questions out loud. When emotions stalled, they paused and read the rule book. Real order felt strange, but right. Afterward, Sandra approached me in the parking lot. "You kept your word," she said. "So did you," I replied. She hesitated, then extended her hand. "You're not the enemy I thought you were." I shook it. "And you're not the villain I made you out to be, just someone who forgot what power was for." For the first time, she smiled. Small, weary, almost human. When I got home, I opened the last binder, Phase 4, and flipped to the back page. Empty. I wrote one line in pen. "Reform achieved, October 24th, 2025. Then I closed it for good. Over the next month, change rippled through Blue Ridge. The audit report became a template for other neighborhoods. 3 nearby HOAs reached out to Dana, asking how to adopt similar reforms. She laughed over the phone. "Congratulations, Cole. You've accidentally started a movement." I told her I didn't want a movement. She said, "Too late. Truth spreads faster than rumor when it's documented." Visual beat number 2 came one cold evening when I attended the community potluck they held to celebrate the first open vote. A new banner hung on the clubhouse wall. "Transparency builds trust." Someone handed me the mic. I looked out at the crowd, neighbors who'd once avoided my eyes, now smiling, and said, "I don't want thanks. Just remember, rules exist to serve people, not trap them." Applause rolled through the room, soft but real. Later that night, I stood alone by my truck, the reflection of the banner fluttering across the chrome. I thought about my father again, about the promise carved into every fence post. Maybe the lesson wasn't about winning, it was about holding ground until the right people noticed why it mattered. The next morning, a letter arrived from the insurer confirming closure of the case. The HOA would receive coverage again under one condition: full compliance with the new integrity charter. A signature line waited at the bottom for both of us. I signed mine in blue ink and dropped it in the mailbox, now straight and sturdy again. But there was one last step before I could move on. I drove to the county office, filed a document transferring the easement parcel, Blue Ridge Access Holdings, to the HOA under the new charter. The clerk looked surprised. "You're giving it back?" "Not giving," I said. "Trusting." Back in the truck, I sat for a long while watching the yield. Courthouse steps shimmer in the afternoon heat. Power once earned only means something when you know how to release it. Visual beat number 3 happened a little after midnight. I took the old Integrity Charter draft, the one with my father's quote scribbled on the back, and slid it into a new frame beside the barn door. The glass caught the reflection of the firelight, soft and golden. It wasn't a trophy. It was a reminder. A few days later, the county website published the full audit results and reform charter. Headline: Blue Ridge sets precedent for HOA transparency model. The article mentioned our vote count, the restitution payments, and even the creation of a new Community Fair Practices Council, run by residents, open to all. Watching it unfold felt surreal. I'd started this to save one ranch and ended up changing the rulebook for hundreds. If you've followed this far, ask yourself, if the same thing happened on your street, would you fight or fold? Tell me below, because the next reform might start with your comment, your story, your proof that rules can still be rewritten. The first frost deepened into winter, and with it came quiet contentment. No late-night knocks, no envelopes taped to the gate, just the rhythmic sound of horses breathing in the cold. It would have been easy to stop there, to say done and walk away, but the story had one last note to play. Because reform, once started, always demands renewal. The new year came quiet and bright. Frost glittered on the gate like powdered glass, and for the first time since the fight began, the ranch felt light again, like the air itself had exhaled. I started each morning the same way: coffee, boots, sunrise over the pasture. The horses knew the routine. So did I. Then one morning I found a small envelope slipped under my gate. No logo, just handwritten. "Thank you for what you did. My son can finally play outside again without someone complaining about noise." There was no name, only a drawing of a kid on a swing. I pinned it to my fridge, right next to Lily's school photos. The HOA now held monthly meetings streamed online, minutes published within 48 hours, budgets transparent down to the dollar. People still disagreed, but now they debated like neighbors, not combatants. The rulebook hadn't vanished. It had been rewritten in plain English, one clause at a time. Dana called mid-February. "We've got an interesting proposal," she said. "County's creating a pilot program, community integrity workshops. They want you to co-lead the first one." I laughed. "I'm no teacher." "You're the only one they'll listen to," she said. I thought about it for a moment. All right, but only if they let me use real stories. The first workshop met in the same courthouse room where I'd once fought for an easement. 20 residents from across the county sat around folding tables, each with their own stack of letters, notices, fines. Their faces carried the same exhaustion I used to see in the mirror. I started simple. "I'm not here to preach. I'm here to show you how to document, verify, and persist. Fairness has a paper trail. You just have to follow it." For 3 hours we went line by line, statutes, due process, notice timelines, quorum requirements. I could almost hear my father chuckling somewhere above, proud that his son turned outrage into a syllabus. By spring, 3 more HOAs in neighboring counties adopted similar reforms. A local journalist called it the Mercer model. I hated the title, but couldn't deny the change. Hallie interviewed me again for a follow-up. "Do you ever regret how far you took it?" she asked. "Not once," I said, "because sometimes you have to buy the dirt beneath their feet before they realize who really owns the ground." She smiled. "That's a quote. If you believe I fought the right way, and this is how it should end, say a few words in the comments for your friend, or the neighbor who's still afraid to speak up. Subscribe so future stories reach you first. And share this one, not for me, but for the next person who needs proof that quiet persistence still wins." The county sent me a plaque later that summer, etched brass, nothing fancy. It read, "For advancing fairness in community governance." I hung it inside the barn, beside the frame holding my father's quote, "Honesty outlasts authority." On the first anniversary of the vote, the community gathered for what they called Blue Ridge Day. No agenda, no politics, just food, laughter, and one long table stretching across the green. Sandra was there, helping serve chili. When she saw me, she nodded, almost shy. "We're holding steady," she said. "Good," I replied. "Keep it that way." As dusk settled, Lily tugged my sleeve. "Dad," she said, pointing toward the clubhouse, "they hung your sign back up." It was the old reflective one. Right of way maintained by county. No private jurisdiction. Except now someone had taped a new piece of paper beneath it, and maintained by us. I stood there for a long time, watching the light fade, hearing the slow, steady crunch of gravel under footsteps heading home. The porch lights flickered on one by one, each small bulb a promise that no single hand would ever control this place again. What changed after was quiet but permanent. The insurer reinstated full coverage under the new charter. The county published the HOA reform guide statewide. Sandra's husband repaved the road for free, this time under open contract. And every year since, they've held a scholarship for civic studies in my father's name, the Honest Ground Award. I still get letters, people asking how to start, how to fight, how to win without losing themselves. I tell them all the same thing. Start with proof. Stay calm. And remember, the land remembers who stood for it. The ranch hums at night now, cicadas low and steady, wind moving through the trees. I lock the gate, tip my hat to the fence line, and whisper the same words every time. Stay honest. Then I turn toward the house, porch light steady, and the story finally exhales into quiet.